I know you're involved, you got involved in this whole disclosure thing about the legislative expenses
Yeah.
in the House.
Yeah.
Could you kind of review that? What did you do? What is this with, I don't know, it's half a dozen legislators in the House who have a problem with the way DeLeo's not being open about it? Could you just review the whole thing that went on?
Sure. I mean, there's a few different things going on in that mix, and it is useful to distinguish them. For me as an issue, I've always been somewhat aware of these issues, but I got focused on them really in November when we took some votes about legislative spending. We appropriate money in the budget cycle, which is more like sort of June and July, or April, May, June, July. But then there's sort of little budgets that get small budgetary measures we do throughout the year, and one of those is a budget that we do at the end of the final budget to clean up everything for fiscal 2009. So fiscal 2009 ended on June 30th, 2009, and we had to. But there were sort of closeout items, accounts that had been overspent, accounts that had a little bit money left over in them, and so forth. The legislature does a thing of rolling over any money that it had in its own accounts. Typically, account money dies at the end of every year. If you didn't spend it, it's gone. If it was appropriated for fiscal 2009, you didn't spend it by June 30th or encumber it by June 30th, it's no longer available for expenditure. But there's a thing called prior appropriations continued, where you roll over that money to be available in the present fiscal year. So that's been a subject of controversy. The legislature has had a habit of rolling over a large amount of money, sort of push from year to year to year. That amount of money was, the total budget of the legislature is in the ballpark of $60 million a year. But
all but a couple million is salaries, right?
Well, no, it's a little more than that. That's not salaries. That's about $60 million a year, and they had about $30 million that they were rolling over as of 2008.
Wow!
So it's sort of a lot of slack. I mean, that's more than you think you need. Now we with a lot of fanfare cut our budget in 2008, right? In early 2000, in the sort of middle of fiscal 2008. In other words, January 2009, January. Excuse me, I'm getting my years mixed up here. I guess that would have been January 2009, rather. So it must have been in the middle of fiscal 2009. We said we were making a big contribution to the deficit by cutting our budget. But what we really meant is we were just releasing some of that extra $30 million. We weren't actually cutting staff at all. And then we did the same thing again in this budget. We released a certain amount of money. But we were still rolling over into this year in November about $18 million. And so I said, no, hold on a second. I mean, we're cutting every place else, and we're not really, and we're carrying $18 million of surplus into our own $60 million budget. That didn't feel right. And so that's when I tuned into the issue. I sponsored an amendment to cut that budget a little bit, and people came down on me like a ton of bricks and said, back the heck off of that. And it turns out we cut the amount that we were rolling over, and I did at that time say, okay, but what it turned out was that although it had been portrayed to membership as something that had to do with capital spending and this is capital money that we sort of need to run the legislature and so forth, in this particular fiscal year, basically all of that rollover was going to be used to preserve staffing levels, and so the legislature, which is basically at exactly the same staffing level it was when the recession began in the middle of 2008. So we haven't really cut anything in terms of our own spending, and that again, where we're cutting human services and their job losses elsewhere and so forth. That again just didn't feel right. And most people who would walk around the legislature would feel that there's the possibility of cutting some staff here and there. There are pockets of clear overstaffing.